Hi everyone, welcome to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast, your daily audio summary of the latest news reported in the Ukrainian media. We would really appreciate if you could rate us in the app where you are listening to this podcast, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, or any other. This will help more people to find out about the highlights and the truth about the war in Ukraine. My name is Artem, and here is the news. For 281 days, Ukraine defends itself against the forces of the Russian invasion. Ukraine may forbid the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is part of the Russian Orthodox Church. President Volodymyr Zelensky informed that he held a meeting of the National Security and Defense Council on the topic of connections of certain religious circles in Ukraine with Russia. In his evening video address, Zelensky said that the government will submit to parliament a draft law on making it impossible for religious organizations affiliated with Russia to operate in Ukraine. Also, the State Service for Ethnopolitics and Freedom of Conscience was commissioned to ensure the religious examination of the statute of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is a part of the Russian Orthodox Church, to legally confirm this connection. It is also tasked to check legal grounds on which this church is using Kiev-Pechersk Lavra Monastery, which is one of the oldest in Ukraine. The president also announced future personal sanctions against those in religious circles who will be found connected to Russian special services. Zelensky stressed that all these actions are aimed at ensuring Ukraine's spiritual independence. Head of the Russian Church, Patriarch Kirill, openly supports Russia's war against Ukraine. Yesterday he said that Donbas is allegedly the front line of defense of the Russian world, reports TSN-UA. And this Russian world, according to Kirill, is not limited to Russia, but is everywhere where people who are brought up in the traditions of Orthodoxy and in the traditions of Russian morality live. 50 more Ukrainian defenders have been released from Russian captivity as a result of a new prisoner swap, reports Interfax Ukraine. Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak, said that among those released, there are Mariupol and Azovstal defenders who were kept in Olenivka, where a massive explosion killed around 100 of Ukrainians held in Russian captivity. The president welcomed the news and said that overall, since the start of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine has returned home 1,319 people. US President Joe Biden said that currently he has no intention of talking to Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, but is ready to do so if Putin really shows interest in ending the war he started in Ukraine, reports European Pravda. At a press conference in the White House following the state visit of French President Emmanuel Macron, Biden said that this war can end in one rational way if Putin withdraws his troops from Ukraine, but of course he will not do that. For this, he paid a high price, committed an incredible massacre against the civilian population of Ukraine, bombed kindergartens, hospitals, shelters for children. The very idea that Putin can defeat Ukraine is unthinkable, Biden emphasized. French President Emmanuel Macron said that the West will not push Ukraine to make compromises in the war with Russia, which it will consider unacceptable. Instead, Kyiv should decide when and how to start negotiations. The EU countries' representatives reached a preliminary agreement on the introduction of a ceiling price for Russian oil. It will initially be $60 per barrel and will be revised every 2 months to be lower than the market price, reports European Pravda. The decision still needs to be approved in writing by all EU governments by Friday. Previously, Poland insisted that the upper limit should be as low as possible in order to reduce Russia's income from the sale of fossil fuels. The original G7 proposal agreed last week called for a price cap of $65 to $70 per barrel with no adjustment mechanism. Known British traveler, TV presenter, host of the TV show Man vs. Wild and writer Bear Grylls visited Ukraine and met President Volodymyr Zelensky, reports Ukrainska Pravda. Zelensky thanked Grylls for sharing information about the struggle of Ukrainians for their freedom and democracy with the world. Bear Grylls announced plans to release a special episode about his trip to Ukraine. If you like what we do and would like to tip us, you can now do so directly to our PayPal. Check out the link in the description to this episode for more details. And as usual, you can subscribe to our Patreon. In gratitude for your help, we will give you access to a series of exclusive episodes on wartime life in Ukraine. We call on you to demand from governments of your countries to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Russia and its citizens to stop their invasion of Ukraine.